I'm just going to talk for a second about selection of images to use as inspiration. I'm about to run through a bunch. You'll notice that some of the ones that I just sort of scroll right past are either very simple, they don't have detail for me to pull out, or they're very, very ornate. They're so busy that I don't feel like I'm going to be able to get clean lines out of them. The ones that I wind up picking, if you'll notice this one here, it has a lot of ornate detail, but there's room between those details, so it's going to be a little bit easier to selectively pick some of those details and then pull them out with the ASCII that I do. So use my finder tools to select the ones that look promising, and then I keep scrolling through. I think I wind up finding 4 different pieces in this process that kind of match what I'm looking for potentially, and I run through them, mark them, and I actually need to talk to the person who commissioned this piece to figure out what is most preferred by them. I think this one here probably has the most potential for feeling like very important armor as opposed to um, overly fancy stuff, but you know, it looks functional but also very ornate, which is sort of something that I'm going for with this particular commission. It's a very practical character, and it's a very high-end piece. Lots of these just have too much going on. This one is cool because if you see the angles of those details in the middle, it had a similar angle to the forward and the backslash, which means that I'll be able to really strongly pull those out. And then I get through the rest and there's just nothing else there. So those 4. Okay, so I'm opening up this particular one. I actually don't think this is going to be what I use for my actual commission, but this one is very straightforward, and so I wanted to work with it. The first thing that I'm doing here is I am cropping down very tightly, um, and I'll go way zoomed in here in a second so that you see exactly how tightly I crop. There's a reason for this. I crop very tightly to the top and to the left side. I don't worry so much about the bottom or the right side. I don't have to, and you'll see why in just a second. But if I don't get tight to the left side, and if I don't get tight to the top, what I wind up doing is leaving room where the edges of the letters won't actually correspond to what's going on there at the edge of the item. So I want to make sure that I'm really, really super close. Over on the right-hand side, I can just sort of stop typing whenever I get there, but if the left edge of my text isn't actually justified to the edge of the object, then it's not going to look good. And I'm zooming way, way, way in. Sometimes I don't get this close, but you know. If I'm not quite close enough to the top, I can just wind up using lowercase letters for the top row. But I tend to like to have like the full range of letters for the top, otherwise I wind up having to use like tildes and backticks and stuff, or dashes and stuff, and it winds up making this sort of weird gap at the top. So anyway, crop in very closely, and then choose your horizontal type tool, make a selection that covers the entire thing, and then start typing. This is just going to be, I'm just going to fill it with a single character. I like to use either the @ sign, the letter M, capital, or the capital letter W. Here I'm using the @ sign, and I'm going to fill it all the way from the left side to the right side, and then hit enter, copy that row, and do that over and over again until the whole thing is full. This is not deep science here. It's very straightforward. So if you notice, the bottom line of text doesn't quite come all the way down to the bottom edge of the work that I was doing. So I'm actually going to select it all, go into my character palette, and I'm just going to um, tweak my line spacing and making it a little bigger. That actually didn't really help that much, and it made an extra line of text that's off the screen that you can't see, but every time I copy and paste that text, it winds up in my Muse client, which, you know, I don't want that. Then I change the color of the text to something that still lets me see all of the shape. Pick something that doesn't make your eyes bleed. You're going to be living with this color for a little while, so. Alright, then we get into the, like, real meat and bones of defining the shape. Oh, but first, I am going to take all of this text that's close enough to the bottom for me. I can use descenders. That's characters that have like a drop down, like the lowercase letter P has descenders. The lowercase letter G, Q, all those have descenders. Ignore this. This is me going, oh, I need a window that's not random stuff that I'm trying to figure out how to do. So you pop into Muse, even though we haven't actually done any defining of the shape, pop into Muse, paste your text, convert it to ASCII, copy that, then go put it in your Mush client. Where's my Mush client? I was probably fussing around with it so that like all of my conversations were off the screen. Yep, that's what I was doing. Alright, so you just type think space %R, paste it in, open bracket, N to end any color that's on there. That's just a habit, there's no color on there yet. Get rid of those. So what you should notice is that it's not at the exact same size as what you're working on in Photoshop, but it has a certain correspondence. The width is a little less than what's in your Photoshop window. The height is a little less than what's in your Photoshop window. It is approximately the right shape of the text block that we're working with. So this is good. That's correct line spacing. The easiest way to tell what will be good line spacing is if you go through and get a perfectly square item, type over that, then paste your square of text from that into Muse, pop it into your Mush window, and if what it gives you isn't a square, you need to tune your line spacing up over there on the right where it says 15 point. You need to change that so that it's larger. It should be a larger number if what you're getting out of your Mush client is too tall. You need to make it larger so that there's more space and fewer lines. Anyway, then go through, count your characters left to right, make sure that it's not more than 80, and then you see what I'm doing here. I'm just starting to go through and delete all of the space around the item. I'm not getting like perfect edges or anything at this point. I'm just getting rid of the white space. And I made a decision after I got done that I didn't want the armholes to be part of the object, and so I went back and I did this. I redid the armholes at the end. You see me there fussing with like a couple of different characters that I could have put there, but I didn't really like any of them, and I realized, oh, I'm just actually deleting stuff at this point. I don't need to be refining my edge yet. So I am going to split this and fast forward for a little bit here. So just a moment. Alright, so I'm just slowing down again here. I'm to the end of deleting all of the white space. You can see that in a couple of places I added like a comma instead of a full character, but I didn't really super refine the edge. So now what I'm going to do, I realized I didn't want the inside of the armhole there, so I went back around and deleted the stuff, just pretended like that was white behind there, and deleted out those characters. Um, and so what's going to happen here is uh, in about another 10 seconds or so, I'll be done with this, and then I'm going to copy all of this text, pop it into Muse, convert it to ASCII, and check it out in my client. Doing this periodically just to make sure that the shape is something that you like is sort of really important to ensuring that along the way, like you don't get 99% of the way done with your work and then discover, oh, wow, that's really stretched out and weird looking. I should have, way back in the beginning made some different decisions. So check your work all the time. You can see that extra line of text there that I have to delete out. That's fine. I wind up later in the video here deleting that out of my Photoshop window so that it's not bothering me anymore. Think %R, paste it in, bracket N. It's a good shape. It's, bumpy on the edges because I haven't gone in and picked like the exact characters that are going to give it the smooth lines around the edge that I want. So I'm going to start that process here in just a second, getting this stuff out of the way, and then you can see the next step, which I will start in with, and then I'll split and fast forward again. So this is the thing that seems to really bewilder people, the selection of characters. But like if you think about letters, there are letters that are tall and there are letters that are short. There are letters that are slanty, and there are letters that have all of these various shapes, and you can use them all to sort of get to what you're trying to match. So for example here, the letter A is my go-to sort of short letter on the left side. E is my short letter for the right side. They have like a nice smooth curve that sort of, as things are curving downwards, works pretty good. But I'm just going to go along this edge and pick some different stuff so that it matches almost exactly as I can get it with the edge of the object. So that's what I'm doing. I'm going all the way around and doing that. And so I'm going to fast forward here. And I'm just about done refining that edge. So now that that's pretty much finished, I'm going to finish it up. I'm going to pop it into Muse and convert it to ASCII, pop it into my client, and make sure that I like all of the edges. You'll see that here in just a second after I finish up this top line. So that section that was sped up by 8 times. So like this is a rather long process. It's not trivial at all. So here I am copying, bringing Muse over, pasting in, getting rid of that extra line, converting, and popping into my client. And I think I liked that pretty well, so I more or less leave that as it is. And then I'm going to go back to my workpiece in Photoshop, get rid of Muse here, and I'm going to decide what details I want to pull out. One of the main things that I want to do is I want to define where the neckline is. So I'm going to pretend like that's an edge, and I'm going to go along that edge and pick out characters that show where the line is. Everything that's to the right, for example, of the character that I'm about to pick here, the V and to the right is all in the dark area, and the A and to the left is all in the like actual part that's going to be the shape of the breast piece. So I just pick pieces that go along this edge, and then later when I'm coloring, I'll take this blob that's in the middle for the neck hole, and that'll be colored a nice dark shade, but it'll still be there. It'll still be part of the ASCII, so that it's actually clear, that that's a neck hole and not just like an edge. It's a three-dimensional object. So I'm going to go along here and do that. This doesn't take me very long. And then I'm going to pop it back into Muse. I'm going to see how it looks. And then I'm going to decide, I want to not just have a line there, I actually want to see that little leather border along the neckline, so that I can just sort of have some texture, because there's not going to be a color difference there, so I want to actually see that. And that'll take me just a second to finish this up. It gets popped into Muse in just a second here. And then I bring over my client, paste it in there, and now you can kind of see the beginnings of the neckline. It'll look way better once, like that's colored, and I know that. I just want to have my edges correct, so that, when I color it in, I'm not coloring in random blobs, I'm coloring in like an actual shape. So I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm refining the edge where, the little strip of leather around the neck hole is. I'm going to speed this up again for just a little bit. Alright, I just cleaned up that bottom. I'm pasting into Muse, going back into my client. You see the neckline is very plain here, and there. Now I've made a little bit more detail around the neckline. And that's going to be easier to texture and color later on. So that's why I did that. Oh, you get a random info message. So now we're coming back in, and I'm really looking now very critically at the piece of work that I have and going, what details do I actually want? I know I'm going to want the bottom edge of that sort of collar around the top. So this is me going in and just pretending like that's an edge again, an inside edge and an outside edge. So a short character followed by a tall character makes, an edge that slopes one way, and up there character like an asterisk followed by a short character makes a edge that slopes the other way. And I just go through this whole thing. I think I wind up choosing to do the neckline edge, the sort of edge that's along the ribs, the middle seam at the bottom, and then the three little bands that I said corresponded pretty well with the back and forward slashes. And yeah, so that's what I do here. I'm going to fast forward a little bit. Here I'm just finishing up the joint along the rib. I'm going to finish that up, and then you'll see me do the center seam. Most of the other places in the piece, if something isn't quite perfect, I don't care. I do what I need to do. Um, one side can look a little different than the other. Down this front seam, I feel a little bit differently about it. I feel like asymmetry right at the center is very noticeable. So even though the letter H's that I'm putting along this center seam to define it aren't exactly like on that line, that's okay. It's still going to read correctly when you look at it in ASCII, and so um, that's that's where my priority is. In just a second here, I'm going to be done. I'm going to copy and paste it into Muse, and then pop it into my client and see how it looks. And you'll see lots of edges. You'll see the texture. Um, I don't think I've done the three little decorative bands up in the middle yet here, but it's still good to check your work, and check your work again. Convert it to ASCII. You can already kind of see what it looks like, but the client renders it a little bit differently than Muse because it's a different font it uses. When you're working in Photoshop, make sure that you pick the font that you're using in your client. I use a Monaco because it's a monospaced font. It's what my client uses. I think it's what a lot of Mac clients use. So that's good for me. And here I'm just switching back up to go do those decorative slanting bits in the middle. And these are super easy just because, I'm not trying to replicate anything, just the fact that the bands are there. And I'll get started with this, and then I'll fast forward it. Here we go. Alright, I'm slowed back down. You'll notice along this edge, the forward slash didn't wind up fitting very well because it's not exactly corresponding to the edge that I want to do, so I chose to use the letter V and the A. It still creates a really good sort of sense of that kind of a slant. They can be almost interchangeable. You're still going to see them once you pop it into Muse, which I'm doing right here. And then you'll see it even more once the highlights are added, because edges in a work are going to create variations in how much light is hitting something. So yeah, you can see here, this is what the work looks like. And yeah, and then I just went back because I'm going to keep working. I'm going to decide how much more detail I want, and I'll do another video for coloring.